There is a mod for Minecraft that makes the game look like real life. It adds over 14,000 new blocks to the game. Seeing screenshots of this mod, you would think it's actually fake. This is a mod pack called Conquest Reforged. But what is it like to actually play Minecraft with a mod pack like this installed? Today, I'm going to be comparing what it's like to build in vanilla versus in modded Minecraft, and comparing the two to see if you actually need to mod the game to make it enjoyable. So let's jump into a vanilla world and start building. So starting off here in vanilla, I'm actually really excited to do this. As you can see, I have some shaders as well as resource packs installed. And I don't know about you guys, but part of me really enjoys playing vanilla Minecraft just because I know what to expect. So I would say probably 80% of my time is spent playing in vanilla Minecraft. It's what's most familiar to me. To me, vanilla has a really nice kind of charm to it that sometimes whenever you mod the game and add more and more features to it, it kind of loses that charm just because things get a little bit overcomplicated. So just walking through the world here, I want to see if we can find ourselves a nice little place to build. And this video is going to follow a more unfiltered and live format, so I'm just going to be sharing my thoughts in real time as I build. So I think what's really fun about vanilla is I feel like I have a lot less pressure to build something in a specific style, meaning I don't feel pressured to build things that are ultra realistic or hyper detailed. So for example, that tower right there, it's not a very realistic build, but you know, I think it turned out really cool, as well as, you know, things like the stars above the base. Not a realistic build, but a very stylized and very unique build. And I think that's one of the benefits of playing in vanilla. So let's take this little pathway down to a lake that I have over here, and I want to build ourselves a nice little lake house. So here we are at the lake, and we have this huge open plot of land, and I feel like this will be the perfect place to build a house. And I'm using a mod called Axiom, which really helps with building. And I think for this lake house, I kind of want to follow the natural curvature of this little land here. So whenever I build in Minecraft, I tend not to really focus too much on the specifics of the build, meaning I don't really plan my builds out. It's just I just kind of build however I'm feeling at the time. So sometimes my things don't really line up, and that's totally fine. I just kind of go off of vibes, really. And I don't know about you guys, but my favorite time to play Minecraft is literally right after I get home from work, or you know, kind of late at night. Or even, honestly, the best time to play video games is the night before your day off. So what I want to do with this lake house is actually come out to these columns and bring these up just a single block like this. And later on, it's going to be really interesting to see how using a mod like Conquest Reforged changes the way we build and plan out our builds. Also, the channel's been growing really fast lately, so if you enjoy this type of content, feel free to subscribe. You can always change your mind later. I like to build very methodically almost, so I kind of just build everything piece by piece. And then, you know, I don't really focus too much on the details whenever I'm building at first. I just like to start off very simple, and then I come in after the fact and actually start detailing. So at first the build's going to look kind of blocky and a little bit weird, but as we start spending more time on it, I can actually showcase some more details. So what's kind of interesting is I'm not really too sure maybe what the lore behind this building is, other than it's just going to be a lake house for myself on the lake here. But something I really enjoy doing is I love to give my builds kind of a storyline. So if you guys have any ideas, once we get this build finished, you know, what kind of lore we have here, let me know in a comment. I think that'd be awesome. All right, so we're making pretty good progress on the build right now. And I'm really excited to actually start detailing it out and adding in different blocks, because that's when it gets really, really fun for me. Let me know how you guys build in the comments. If you guys plan out your builds, or if you're more of a freeform builder like I am. I think it's really interesting. I'm actually kind of jealous of people that can plan out their builds. I've never really been a person who can do that. What's going to be really fun is actually trying out the modded building, because it adds so many different blocks to the game. And what I really enjoy about vanilla is that it's kind of it's very easy to think about. It's not super complicated or difficult to kind of wrap your head around. I feel like sometimes whenever you add too many blocks to the game, it can be a little bit difficult to think about how to build with everything. And also in the vanilla sort of style, I don't feel as much pressure to build in any sort of particular way. I feel like whenever I play with more realistic or modded graphics, I tend to want to build things that look a little bit more realistic or convincing. Really curious to hear what your guys' favorite resource packs are. One of my most favorite ones is definitely Excalibur. I tend to play on resource packs that are lower res, so like 16x or 32x. So packs like Excalibur, or packs like this one that are kind of vanilla-esque but include things like connected textures. I'm a huge fan of that. And right now it looks pretty blocky, but once we start getting some details on here, I think it's going to turn out kind of nice. This house has a really wacky and quirky little shape to it. I think one of the things I learned in Minecraft is that you don't have to build, you don't have to complete what you started. So sometimes I'll just totally change out whatever it is, you know, sometimes I'll totally change out whatever I started building, just depending on how it's going, right? So since I don't plan out my builds, sometimes I'll notice like, okay, these colors don't really work well together. So, you know, you just simply change them out. And, you know, you can actually really surprise yourself with what you come up with doing things this way. And I feel like that's one of the benefits of not planning out your builds. But the downside of that is that sometimes you can really overcomplicate things. So I feel like this is starting to look a little bit better. The acacia flows much better into the deep slate. I think one of the things I really want to learn how to do is actually come up with color palettes. Every time I look online, I see so many really good builders, especially on things like Instagram. And the color palettes people come up with is actually incredible. There's actually some very, very talented builders out there. So now what I want to do is actually start making some windowsills, and we could just do this with some stairs. So a little bit later on, I'll actually showcase some of my favorite things to do with windowsills. But let's first get some placed down here. I think by going with the slate bricks instead of cobble, I think it's going to look a little bit nicer and get more of that shingle look that I want to go for here. So that's kind of the fun of building in Minecraft, is a lot of trial and error. You know, that's what makes it satisfying once you actually get a build finished. So whenever I'm building in Minecraft, I tend to have music playing sort of in my headphones, and I'm always curious to hear what your guys' favorite music is whenever you're playing Minecraft, if you play with the default music or if you have your own playlist going on. Right now, I've really been into bands like Arctic Monkeys, just stuff like that, I guess indie pop sort of bands like that. So let me know what type of music you guys are into. Something I was really into when I was younger was collecting things like vinyl records, even though obviously those were before my time a little bit. But I have like a really small vinyl record collection, but it's stuff that I think is really cool. It's actually a lot of modern stuff. So I have things like Arctic Monkeys, like AM album, or things like Favorite Worst Nightmare. I also have some Cage the Elephant as well. It's really fun. It's really fun to like collect stuff like that. I like to have like the physical music. I think it's really cool. Now our roof has a lot better look, I feel like. It's actually a lot of fun trying to use different types of blocks throughout the build here to really give ourselves like a nice blended kind of look. And this is sort of the technique whenever you're building in vanilla. Just really, since there's only so many blocks that you can choose from, it really forces you to think kind of creatively about which blocks you're going to use to build. Whereas whenever we're playing in modded Minecraft, we have a lot more blocks at our disposal, so it's a little bit easier to actually build, I guess, or it's a little bit easier to come up with block palettes. So I think what's really fun about videos like this is I really get to share with you guys like my actual building process in real time. So it can be kind of interesting. I feel like everybody builds in such different ways. And what I want to do with the roof to show a little bit of wear is maybe in the corners here, what I'm going to do is replace some of these with tuff. And I think this will give our roof just a little bit more texture and make it look a little bit more interesting. So it'll be really fun to see as we play the modded version of Minecraft. We texture things is going to change just because we have so much more block variety and block palettes. Texturing really does the most, makes the most difference whenever you're looking at your builds from a distance. So you can see here, just by adding in little little points in the roof that maybe are a little bit worn down, just looks a little bit nicer. So I really like the general shape that we have for the building here. I'm still undecided with what materials I want to use exactly, but I'm thinking what we can do is go for maybe a tavern style build here instead of going for just straight up like log cabin kind of look. So what I want to do is kind of blend in using a bunch of different blocks here. So yeah, I think using this combination of stone, wood, cobblestone, it's all really going to come together and make something kind of cool here. And again, we haven't even gotten into the decoration part. So far, we've just been kind of creating the layout here and figuring everything out sort of in real time. I think by replacing some of the wood with stone bricks here, it's going to give our tavern like a little bit more structure and maybe a little bit more kind of weight or realism. Now, normally I don't start decorating until later, but I think what I want to do is actually add in some leaves here, just growing off the balconies. I feel like this will really help our tavern look immediately better without it costing us a whole lot of like brain power to do. So let's just add in some leaves growing off the edges here of the tavern. I think immediately this actually looks so much better just by adding little details like that. Then what we can do is on top of the roof here, add in some additional vines. Kind of growing in the corners is what I tend to do. This just gives our tavern like this beautiful little character and kind of lived in, grown in sort of look. And I feel like this is where vanilla building really gets its charm from. Is since there's such a limited block palette, you really have to, you know, it really is the small things that make the builds feel nice. Whereas whenever we start playing with the mod pack, there's going to be so much little details we can throw in. Maybe what we can do is actually throw in some windows right up here, just kind of going into the attic. And this build is actually turning out really, really nice. I'm kind of excited for this. I feel like once you get the initial little layout done, it becomes so much easier and so much funner. So maybe what we can do to texture out our build a little bit more is maybe add in some andesite here. That kind of adds in some additional details. Of course, we want more leaves growing off the edge of the build here, just to really give it that grown in kind of character look. And I tend to do my exteriors before I start working on the interiors. And it's really fun playing in vanilla because, you know, I think the charm of vanilla is that anybody can play in vanilla. You don't need like a special computer to play on these sort of, you know, settings. I think that's what makes it so appealing and fun. So a little bit of a building trick that I like to do to give my windows more depth is I like replacing the bottom with a glass pane instead of a full block. And this gives the window like an additional little shutter sort of look. All right, perfect. Now it's time we actually add in some little details. So maybe things like shutters here, just along the windows. I think these look quite nice. Let me see what these ones look like. I think I'll stick with the spruce trapdoors. These to me look more like shutters. I feel like the more depth you can add to your build, the better it's gonna look overall. So, you know, it's really small things like adding shutters to the windows, or maybe using slabs instead of full blocks for your glass. It really makes things look nice here. What I want to do is actually add some more trapdoors here just on the bottom. I think this just adds a little bit more flavor to our builds here. Makes it look a little bit more interesting and just provides more texture here. But even here we can add some additional staircases as well, just to give this part of the build a little bit more character. Alright, so as we can see, the exterior of the tavern is done, and now it's time to work on the interior. And what's going to be really interesting is seeing how our builds change between the different versions of Minecraft. So for example, in vanilla, I feel like our options for furniture are very limited, but it's going to be really cool to see that as we play the modded version of Minecraft, how much more options we have available to us. So I think the first thing I want to do is actually make a little bit of a fireplace here in the tavern. I feel like it's not a proper tavern without a little bit of a fireplace. So I think for the fireplace, I want to make it about 3 wide. And this will also give us an option to actually have some smoke coming out of the chimney, or out of a chimney, which I think will look really, really nice. And kind of a trick I learned is that if you put hay underneath a campfire, it actually produces smoke that's much higher. There we go. I think that looks pretty cool. And I'm really excited to actually play the modded version because it's going to be really interesting to see all the different furniture and things that we have at our disposal to actually use. So for the fireplace, I just want something kind of basic like that. I think that looks good enough. And now I feel like it's a proper tavern with that. And I think this area would make for a nice little bar. So the bar doesn't have to be anything too crazy. I kind of just want something nice and basic here. And since we don't really have furniture in Minecraft, we can just kind of use stairs like this. Then I also want to add just a couple of tables just spread throughout the tavern here. There we go. Now we just have some seating, nice little fireplace over here, and then a nice basic little bar top. And of course we can add like a little barrel here acting as like a keg. I think that looks pretty nice. And for the entrance to the tavern, I actually want like a small little seating area right here, or maybe an area where you can put up your coat. So kind of a cool way you can do that is just by adding a little armor stand, and that can be our little coat hanger. And then a chest where you can throw all of your items. And then we can also add some additional seating in this area here. And I think what's really charming about vanilla Minecraft is that since there isn't really furniture per se, you really have to use your imagination as far as creating your own furniture, and I think that's what makes it kind of special. So let's actually add some more kegs just underneath the staircase here. And since we don't necessarily have food items that we can just do little item frames. So we can have like plates of bread and carrots here at the bar top. And I think it'd be really cool if we had some additional decorations here in the tavern here. So things like swords on the walls. There's just all kinds of fun little decorations we can throw in here. And then to make things a little bit more homey, we can add in some flower pots, just as a basic little decoration here, especially right here by the fire. I think this is such a cozy little set piece. Maybe this could almost be like a mirror or something, or some sort of mural art right here. Okay, perfect. I'm actually really happy with this bottom floor here. I think this has such a nice cozy feel to it. Now let's actually head upstairs and start making actual bedrooms. And I actually really like this area. I think a nice little reading nook or some sort of bookcase here would really, really fit. So just something like that I think makes this space look a little bit nicer. And let's do the same thing in some of these bedrooms where we just throw in some bookcases. And it'll be really fun to see all the different objects that the mods add once we start playing with modded Minecraft. So I want to do a little bit of a bigger bedroom on this side, so that this is like its own room. And then we have a smaller guest room over here. Oh, that actually looks perfect. I really like the way that looks. So let's actually throw in some of these decorated pots just around, just to add some shrubbery to the build here. And to make this room feel a little bit warmer, I'm just going to add a little bit of a carpet in here. I like to give my carpets kind of a wacky shape, just because it makes it feel more flowy, and kind of a basic decoration here, but this is sort of what I was thinking. Just 2 little bedrooms here, a nice little balcony, a chandelier, and then obviously your bar area here. Maybe we could throw in some villagers as well. Alright, now we got a party going on in here. Obviously it's not a tavern if you don't have a pig roaming around the place. And then the villagers are getting kind of turned up here because they're standing on top of everything. So this tavern actually looks super cozy at nighttime. I think the fireplace might be a little bit too high on the top here. Maybe instead of brick for the chimney up here, I want to actually just do cobblestone because I think it'll blend in a little bit better with the rest of the build, but it'll still have a distinct look and feel. I actually really love the way the tavern looks, especially at nighttime here on the lakeside here. This just looks fantastic. Alright, now that the tavern is done in vanilla, let's jump on over to modded and see how much of a difference it makes playing with mods versus just playing in vanilla. Alrighty, so this is Conquest Reforged, which is a mod that adds over 14,000 new blocks to the game. And I'm really excited to showcase this compared to vanilla because we have so much more block variety at our disposal. So I think right now, let's actually start off by creating basically sort of the same idea of what we did before with just a little tavern out here in the woods. And I'm actually really excited to showcase this mod because I see a lot of videos online showcasing Conquest Reforged, but not a lot of videos actually showcase what it's like to play with it or build with it in real time. So this will actually be really exciting and fun. And I also have some terrain generation mods installed as well. So I'm using a combination of Lithosphere and Still Life, and I'll leave the specific versions of these mods as well as the world seed in the description for you guys to check out if you'd like. And I really wanted to thank you guys. The support on the channel has been amazing recently, and I've really been having fun experimenting with different types of formats, especially with these formats where I just kind of compare two different styles of gameplay. So if this is something you guys are interested in, feel free to subscribe. The channel's been growing really fast recently, and I really appreciate you subscribing. Alright, so as we open up the creative menu here, you can see we have literally thousands and thousands of blocks to choose from. So let's create ourselves a little bit of a block palette. I'm going to start off with limestone cobble, maybe some granite cobble, and let's just see what type of shapes we can make ourselves. I think at first I'm just going to start with an outline of a building, and I want our tavern to have a nice C shape just to give it that tavern feel and look. And again, I'm not really going to plan out my build too much. I'm just going to kind of outline roughly what I want this to look like. It's not going to be too exact. And then what I would also like to do is actually build up some of the corners here. And at first this may just look like regular Minecraft, maybe with just a resource pack, but once we start building and detailing it out, you'll actually see all the different blocks that Conquest Reforged introduces to the game. And that's where this mod really starts to shine. And if you guys have ever played with Conquest Reforged, let me know how you guys have enjoyed it. I think it's really fun to play with, especially if you are a creative builder like I am and you just like to build things. And again, following the same little design philosophy, I like to start off really simple and then from here actually start detailing it. And the cool thing with Minecraft, especially creative mode, is that there's not really any rules. I can just kind of play however I like. And I kind of like that our tavern has this really wacky shape to it. I feel like not planning out the builds, you really can come up with some unique shapes, and it gives your build so much just character that I feel like if you totally plan out your builds and try to make them symmetrical, sometimes you can lose that charm or that character. But then there is also downsides of not planning out your builds. For example, you know, that comes with its own challenges. So I feel like there's not really a perfect way to play Minecraft per se. It's just kind of figuring out what works for you in the moment. So you may notice here at nighttime, it's actually pretty dark. And that's because Conquest Reforged uses a shader pack called Bliss, which is a very contrasty and dramatic, sort of realistic looking shader. It's definitely very fantasy-esque, so it gives the world that almost Oblivion or Skyrim kind of look. Alright, so now we have some tutoring on the second floor, and the base is going to be made out of stone. And while we're here, I like to actually go for a slate roof, just because I really like the darker look of slate. So since our building is a little bit of an odd shape here, it's going to be kind of interesting trying to figure out how I want to connect the roofs and what style of roof I want to do as well. So I think for the roof, I want to go for kind of like a steep little look here. So I'm going to interconnect some blocks as well as full stairs. I think this will give our roof that nice steep look, especially in certain areas, just to make it look a little bit more interesting than if it was all stairs. Again, we haven't even gotten into the actual detailing of Conquest Reforged, so it'll be really fun to actually start showcasing that a little bit here as well. Because Conquest Reforged really comes to life when you actually detail things out. Right, I really like the elevation of this little tavern here. It's kind of quirky, kind of weird, but I like it. So if I press V on my keyboard, you can see it brings up a GUI menu, kind of a radial of all the different blocks that Conquest Reforged introduces to the game. So we have things like archways and pillars that we can start implementing in here. But first I want to actually start texturing out the walls just a little bit here. I'm thinking what we can do is in the corners, I want to go for this mortar masonry. I think this looks actually pretty cool. This will help give our build that nice little character that we're looking for here. So whenever I do the corners, I kind of just, maybe I'll bring some parts out a little bit like that. I really think about building as if I'm painting in Minecraft a little bit. So just super free flow, not really thinking about it too much, just really trying to have fun and enjoy the process. For me, Minecraft is kind of this creative outlet in a way, since I'm not really the type of person that paints or does anything like that. So this is my my like creative outlet, I guess. And since Conquest Reforged has so many different blocks in the game, you can see we can have a really nice gradient between all the blocks here. So we can transition into granite cobble now. You can kind of see how the walls slowly almost melt together a little bit. It actually gives it such a nice warm and like rich look. And I feel like this is kind of nice. You have like really strong corners and it slowly fades into cobblestone here, and everything has nice connected textures. Okay, so now I want to actually showcase some proper Conquest Reforged building. So what I'm going to do is grab some vertical slabs, and I'm going to actually bring out these corners of the wall just a little bit. So you can see here, I've added some depth on the corner to give our wall just a little bit more weight and make it actually look like it's made out of stone. So this is the main difference between vanilla and something like Conquest Reforged, is being able to play around with depth like this. So I feel like this is where we can really get super creative with our build and really make it something kind of special and unique. And again, similar idea here. I'm not really spending too much time thinking about exact placements. I'm just kind of blotching everything on here. Maybe I'll make some parts of the wall a little bit thicker than others, just depending on the mood I'm in. This is going to give our tavern a really nice, like, lived-in feel. So what's kind of funny is in real life, you want your builds to be like pretty much perfect, right? But in Minecraft, to give it that like lived-in and realistic look, it has to actually be imperfect, which I always thought was kind of interesting. It's very similar if you grew up playing The Sims like I did. You would actually add clutter to your builds to make them look lived in rather than like perfectly showcased, or like showing sort of homes. So I always thought that was kind of a funny quirk of video games, is you want things to actually be imperfect to make it look realistic. So what I want to do now is actually bring out some of the tutoring here. Not all of it, but just key parts of it I think would look really nice. And these are going to act as our little balconies or little windows. And I can actually fill in these corners with additional detailing as well. So just like how we can add detailing to the stone, we can do the same exact thing with our tutoring. So if I press V on my keyboard while we're hovering over our tutoring, you can see I can add these vertical quarters on the windows. And I can fill in the corners just like that. And now we have a nice smooth gradient between that block and that block. And you can just do this pretty much indefinitely, or however much you'd like. There's not really any rules here. And the best way to think about Conquest Reforged is it works very similar to how snow works in vanilla Minecraft. So everything is just very incremental. And already I feel like this build is starting to look like a proper tavern here. And what's really cool is that pretty much every block in the game you can actually build incrementally. So it's not just things like stone. You can also do it obviously with things like tutoring as well. So I think that's something that's really cool about Conquest Reforged is pretty much every block that you can play with, it gives you the option to add just tons and tons of detail and texturing to everything. So right now I'm just gonna actually fill in the corners here with tutoring to make it kind of blend in a little bit better. So what we can do is actually bring out the wall just a little bit like that. And the goal here is to really just blend in everything and make the transition between blocks as smooth as possible. That's kind of my whole approach with this. And I always feel like my Minecraft worlds are constantly a work in progress. I'm always switching things up and tweaking things, and you know, you never know until you build it if you're gonna like it or not. So it's kind of fun. It's fun trying to figure things out in real time here with you guys. Alright, I'm really liking this so far. This looks kind of nice. So what we can do to make the tutoring look a little bit better is actually add these quarter slabs here just above the windows. And this will help kind of blend in the roof with the tutoring below it. And again, everything can kind of be built in incrementally here. So there's, you know, quarter slabs and basically all kinds of different slabs we can throw in here. So yeah, you can see, even though it's simple in practice, just by adding incremental building like this, you can really start detailing your Minecraft builds almost to a totally new level. I've gotten comments from people saying this reminds them a lot of Vintage Story. I've never played Vintage Story, but if you have, let me know if this is similar or not. And now I also want to make like a little bit of a chimney. I think that would make this roof look a lot better. And we haven't even started the interior quite yet. I've been having so much fun just doing the exterior. So that's definitely something we gotta work into here. So now's a good time to actually introduce some archways as we build the chimney here. So I'm gonna fill in the quarters with our quarter slabs here. This helps give the chimney a more rounded look. Even though it's a subtle detail, I think it kind of adds up. And that's kind of the whole point of Conquest Reforged, is it is all just subtle detailing that eventually adds up into a bigger picture here. I think that looks like a really convincing chimney here. As you can see here, we just added in some quarter slabs to blend everything in nicely here. And to give the roof even more character and a little bit more kind of nuance, what we can do is actually add these slabs like this. And I feel like this just adds a little bit more variation. And again, like I was saying, character to the roof, making it look a little bit more lived in and not so perfectly symmetrical. But one of the things you can definitely notice between building with mods versus vanilla is just how much detail and depth you can throw into absolutely everything. And, you know, sometimes that can actually be kind of overwhelming. You know, so there is part of me that sometimes likes playing vanilla, right? Because it's a lot simpler, it's easier to wrap your head around. But, you know, it is cool to see that this is an option. So another great use for archways is actually as windows. So you can see the archways just give the window like a much nicer character, I feel like. And it's going to make this bottom section seem a little bit, well, I guess a lot more interesting. So I'm just going to add in some archways just throughout the build here. Sometimes they'll line up with the windows above them, sometimes they won't. Just kind of depends how I'm feeling at the time. So a really cool thing that we can do with the archways here is we can actually make doorways with them as well. So you can notice here the archways don't perfectly connect, but if we right click them, now we can have a nice archway all the way through. So another really cool thing that Conquest Reforged adds to the game is these tall doors like this. I think these actually look really, really cool. And this to me definitely looks like a tavern door, just really tall oak door, really heavy door. leading into the tavern. And we haven't even started the interior quite yet, but there's a couple more details we can add on the outside here. So we can add quarter slabs underneath the windows to give it a windowsill. And I think this is a nice finishing touch to the windows. This to me really completes the look of these arched windows down here on the bottom floor. Right, so in addition to stone, there's also tons and tons of different wooden planks that we can do. I really like these old oak wood floors. I think these look fantastic. And then let's also grab some narrow oak. And let's see how these look in combination with each other. Again, I want the tavern to have this nice lived-in feel. So let's quickly fill in the floors here in the tavern. And in addition to building blocks, Conquest Reforged also adds in things like furniture, which I'm really excited to showcase here. So kind of how we design the exterior, I also want to do the same thing with the interior, where we just kind of build everything piece by piece. So I'm thinking the old oak is definitely going to be here towards the entryway here. And maybe just kind of dotted around the corners. I'm just going to kind of blotch in our texturing here. Again, with textures, there's not really a whole lot going on in my brain as far as specifics, but I think this looks nice. It's a nice subtle little detail here. And again, the whole point is that all the details add up to a bigger picture. Maybe some additional detailing is that the top floor is actually made out of narrow oak instead of the larger oak that's on the bottom. Yeah, I really like the idea of having the thinner planks be up on the top floor here. To me, these look a lot homier. And I haven't really thought about how exactly I want to lay everything out. But once I have the floors in, we can start thinking about how we want the rooms, how many rooms we want, how we want the bar set up, how we want all the tables. I really like to do my builds piece by piece. For some reason, it just makes it easier for me to think about it that way, instead of trying to figure it all out at once. I like to just get one section of the build done at a time. So now I feel like it's a great time to add in some windows. And I really like these square windows, square pattern windows. I think these look fantastic. These really give it that like Tudorish, Old English kind of look. And Conquest Reforged, I think, is definitely intended for creative mode. So I guess that is a benefit of playing vanilla, is that you can do everything in survival. I've played Conquest Reforged with survival mode before, but it can just be a little bit difficult. There's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through in order to play in survival mode. The main one being that you have to pretty much use the stone cutter to access all the different blocks. But there is compatibility mods that you can install on top of Conquest Reforged that basically lets you craft things in survival mode, or it gives you crafting recipes. So you may notice here, I'm not actually able to place a window here because there's an archway in the way. But what I can do is get rid of the archway. And then if I press V on my keyboard, you can see it gives us these things called facades. And what these allow us to do is basically have it look like we have an archway without it taking up an entire block. So now it looks like the windows arch, but it doesn't actually take up 2 blocks like these windows do. So it's pretty cool. Cool little option that we can throw in there. So something else we can add to add just that extra layer of detail is some window shutters here on the windows here. I think this just totally completes the look. And what's cool with these is you can select how open you want them. So maybe we'll have some of them just cracked open and then other ones will be wide open, just to add more variety and character to our build here. So to add some character to our build, what I'm going to do is kind of texture in some slabs here on the roof, just to maybe flatten out the roof a little bit or make it look a little bit more natural and not so blocky. So far the tavern's looking pretty good, but I think it looks just a little bit plain. So a really easy way to fix that is just by adding in some leaves. This is kind of like my go-to if I ever feel like a build looks a little bit plain. So let's just have some leaves growing off the edges here of the build. What's cool with this is there's not really an exact science. It's just whatever you think looks the best. But generally speaking, if I look at an area and I feel like it looks a little bit plain, that's kind of my cue that, okay, that's the spot to add in leaves. I just kind of do that all the way around. And don't be afraid to give your leaves like really wacky and weird shapes here. Honestly, the more organic and wacky the shape is, the better it's going to look. And what I really like doing with the cypress leaves is kind of just throwing them in here. I feel like it just makes these vines look a little bit more lively and interesting, having these kind of spread throughout them. So something I feel like is missing is actually supports underneath the timbering here. So what I want to do is just add in our little beams just like this. I feel like this makes these look a lot nicer. It's a really simple detail, but I think it looks a lot better than what we had it as before. So if you're somebody who really likes nerding out about the details in your builds, I feel like Conquest Reforged is really for you. The only downside I feel is that when I first started using it, it can be a little bit overwhelming because there's so much variety of blocks to choose from. But you know, after a little while, you kind of get used to it and you sort of learn. I think the main thing is learning how to utilize everything. Once you kind of learn the basics of it, just knowing that everything is very incremental and you can really, you know, just thinking about making the transitions between blocks as smooth as possible, it makes it a lot easier to kind of comprehend, at least for me. So something I kind of want to do is on the corners here, I want to actually fill these in with quarter slabs instead of full blocks, just to give even more depth on the edges here. I think that actually looks really, really cool. It's a subtle detail, but I think it kind of is worth the extra effort here. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. Are we overdoing it, or is this the way to go? I honestly think it kind of hits. This is honestly hitting for me. And maybe even in this area we could add like a horse stable, or maybe even a balcony somewhere. That'd be kind of cool as well. But I'm really liking how this is turning out. I think this is going to be really, really fun once it's finished. And we haven't even done the interior quite yet because I've just been switching between everything. One last little detail I want to add to the exterior is actually replacing some of the roof tiles with, instead of regular slate, we're going to use old slate. And this will kind of help blend in our leaves that we have here. Again, this is such a small detail, but I really want to showcase all that Conquest Reforged really adds to the game. Just to sort of show like you can really go in as much depth as you would like to with something like this. This is kind of where maybe rain would be collecting and kind of sitting in the corners of the roof. Alright, so now that we have the exterior mostly done, I think this is the perfect time to actually work on the interior of the tavern. I feel like this is where things really start to pick up, especially as we do things like the interior, because there is so many different blocks that we have at our disposal. So I think this is probably a good little spot to do a fireplace. So let's quickly frame something out here. These campfires don't look that great because there's actually rocks here, but a really easy way to fix that is if we come back in here, we can grab some quarter slabs and simply just fill it in like that. And that kind of covers up the bottom of the block there. So now it looks like a fireplace. And this is perfect. I really like the way this looks. I feel like this gives this area of the tavern a nice warmness to it. Another area I kind of want to work on is the entryway here. So what I want to do is have a nice two-story entrance, just like how we have at the on the vanilla build. I guess I kind of want to just make the same build, but a different little version of it in every game here. So for the stairs, I'm just going to do a very basic staircase at first, and then we can come in later and kind of decorate it or make it look a little bit nicer with some different blocks. But I just want a rough little idea. So of course, a really cool thing we can add in is our little chandelier here, just hanging from the ceiling. So now we have a, instead of having to make our own chandelier, we can just kind of place one in. I think this gives our entryway that nice warm feel that we're really wanting here. So for the fireplace, I think giving it a nice rounded look is really going to help it, you know, kind of look like that tavern aesthetic that I'm going for here. And then you may notice, since it's not a perfect archway, we can just actually add in a slab like that. So kind of the fun thing with Conquest Reforged is learning all the different blocks that it adds. So I think a way to fix how bulky our fireplace is by using these vertical slabs instead of full blocks. I think that looks pretty nice actually. And I think to really give it that tavern aesthetic, we need to just add like an area rug right in front of the fireplace. I think that looks nice. And now, now that we have the fireplace done, I think we need to start thinking about how exactly we want to lay everything out. So where do we want the bar? Where do we want all the tables? All right, I really like this arch bar. This looks really, really cool. Now we can start thinking about where we want our shelving to go. So maybe we'll just do 2 shelves on either side here. Let's just fill these up with all kinds of different bottles. And this is part of a mod called Hearthfire, which is an add-on to Conquest Reforged. There we go. I think this actually looks like a really nice cozy bar here. Plenty of drinks for the patrons to drink from and choose from. And to help connect the bar and make it look a little bit nicer, we can obviously fill in the corners just like that. I feel like that makes this look more like a shelf. I kind of like the window in the middle. Alright, so it took me a little while to figure out exactly how I want the bar to go, but I think this looks pretty good for now. Alright, so now what I want to do is actually start adding some food and just various bottles around the bar here. I think this is kind of how a bar would look in a tavern, just tons of bottles everywhere. Another little detail I want to add is a sword on the counter here. So if there was some mercenaries here, they'd probably leave their sword and equipment all over the place. So we want to add in our stools just right here. Just a couple of seats in front of the fireplace. I think this is so far the bar is actually turning out really, really nice. And now I want to think about how to lay out all the tables. So I kind of want to use a mixture of different tables here. So we have these really beautiful Arabic tables. Let's just put these on the other side of the fireplace. Then we also have these rounded tables, which are definitely more akin to something you'd see in a tavern, I feel like. So something I really want to add in here is actually some beams going across the ceiling. I feel like this will really give our tavern that tavern feel, and also just add some additional details to the build. Yeah, to me this is what makes something look like a tavern, is having the beams going across like that. So I'm gonna actually add some of these dandelions hanging around the build here. I don't know why, I just feel like these look really nice. Kind of soften up the stone of everything, because everything is so super stony in this build. So just adding some foliage hanging from the ceiling. Never a bad idea. Alright, so now what I would like to do is look through all the storage options that we have here, because I feel like a tavern would just have tons and tons of random little crates filled with food or drinks or supplies. So I want to just fill my build up with all kinds of stuff here. Any space I can find to put in a detail, I'm going to do it. I think these hanging little moose heads and deer heads look really nice. Then I also threw in the grandfather clock over here on the side. So what I want to do is start filling in the corners or the edges of the build with these little crates. Maybe this is the tavern's extra supplies that they have here. But as you can see, there's just plenty of items to choose from in Conquest Reforged. It's basically endless, I feel like. But definitely in areas like this underneath the stairs, I just feel like this is a spot where you would find some crates laying around. So in the entryway here, I really want to throw in this clothes rack. I just feel like this is something you would see at a tavern. It's something like this. And throw in some boots, just laying on the ground here. Maybe even a little bit of a bench that someone could sit at while they put their shoes off. Throw in some storage here. Yeah, I feel like these areas where people are going to be sitting or standing around a lot, the wood's going to be a little bit more warped. And it just makes the table section look a little bit better. 'Cause it's like, okay, there's actual like clear differences here between like floors that are new and then the floor where everybody's been sitting and walking through. It's just really small details like that that I really enjoy throwing into my builds. This is perfect. I really, really love the way this looks right now. Okay, I feel like this tavern is actually looking pretty nice. Of course, we gotta take some bottles here and just throw these around on all the tables. I feel like this tavern would be so much fun to hang out at because of just how lively it feels. But you can see with all the decorations, now it actually feels like a living and thriving little place here. So I do feel like there is something missing, so I want to throw in some tapestries like this. These kind of help give the tavern more of a warm, lively, just a more warm, cozy feel rather than it being super stone cold. I'm not really thinking about the placement too much. I just kind of want to throw these in. Maybe these are banners from other adventurers that they've left up here. Yeah, my whole goal here is I just want the tavern to feel nice and homey, someplace you would probably find out in the middle of the woods, and you would want to, you know, stay the night at. Now what I want to do is add in a little railing for our staircase here. And for the layout of the upstairs, I'm not quite sure what I want to do with it, but I definitely want, you know, at least a couple of rooms here. So maybe we'll have a hallway just going down this way. Alright, so now let's start furnishing the bedrooms. This one's going to be like the smallest room here, but the view outside actually looks really nice. So that's pretty sweet. This is definitely a larger of the two bedrooms here. And then here's going to be kind of like the master suite room here. So maybe this is where the owner of this place would sleep. And let's actually furnish out this room. So I want to have like a little desk in here that somebody could be working at. So I want to actually move the desk on this side here. Throw some books right there. But you can just see there's so many different objects to choose from. So we have things like telescopes that he could be looking out of. And this just has a really cozy kind of feel to it. And like I was saying, I love adding clutter just everywhere. You know, just really basic decoration here, but you can really see how much detail you're able to get in here with something like Conquest Reforged. And this is just a very like basic demonstration. There's so much more you could actually do with something like this. I actually kind of like that some of the rooms are a little bit cluttered. Makes it a lot more interesting and actually feels like it's lived in. Alright, so now I want to work on the exterior just a little bit. I think adding a little bit of a horse stable right out front here would really help make this tavern look nice and lived in. So I think what we can do is maybe we could even add a little bit of a balcony in this corner of the build. It'd look kind of cool. So let's give that a try here. I think what's really cool about mods like Conquest Reforged is just how much variety and opportunity it kind of gives you to experiment around and play around with all the blocks. As I'm kind of playing with Conquest Reforged, one of the things I'm really thinking about is, okay, is this more enjoyable than, you know, just the vanilla game? I don't know if it's more enjoyable per se, but I will say it's more in-depth. So I think it's really just kind of depending on what you're really wanting in the moment. So I'm really curious to hear what you guys are thinking of the build so far. Which one do you think is better? I feel like the vanilla build has kind of a certain charm to it that you can't really replace in a mod pack, because in vanilla you have to be a little bit innovative with what you choose to do. Whereas with a mod pack, obviously it adds different blocks that you can play with or choose to use. And I think that's kind of one of the charms of vanilla, is the fact that there isn't as many options available. All right, let's just add a couple groups of villagers. And the villagers in this texture pack look kind of unsettling because they have the realistic looking face. Of course, we got to add in our little pig here as well, just to showcase some of the mob skins. And yeah, this place is definitely jumping. Nice and lively little place by the fire here. And then you got the bar. The barkeep has ran off and now he's drinking with the patrons. All kinds of out of control going on here. And we just have so many different decorations at our disposal here. So sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming deciding, hey, like what exactly do we want to do with this this build here? You know, what do we want to fill in the space with? That's one of the benefits I feel like of playing in vanilla mode, because there's not too many options, I guess. So meaning that you know, you're not going to feel overwhelmed as easily, I guess. So that's just something I kind of notice as I'm playing, is sometimes when you have too many options, it can be a little bit overwhelming, but you just have to take things kind of slow and just one thing at a time. What I'm gonna do is take some of these flower pots and just fill it in with some bushes. I think this helps kind of give this space a little bit more life and a little bit more, I don't know, it feels nice to have foliage inside the builds instead of it being all just stone or all just decoration. It's kind of nice to add some variation to it. And the pig was about to go in the fireplace there for some reason, which is kind of funny. So another thing I want to do actually is kind of fix this this roof section. I feel like it looks a little bit awkward. So we have this nice open gable here, and I think a really fun thing we could do is take some Gothic arches here. Now we have a nice little cutout just above the window. It's sort of a smaller detail, but I think it looks really nice. You know, it can be kind of difficult to play in something like survival mode because of how intricate and in-depth everything is. So that is one downside of Conquest Reforged, I feel like, is that if you want the full experience, you do have to play in creative mode. But if you don't mind that, or if you're somebody who plays in creative mode normally like I do, then, you know, that's not necessarily a downside. Whereas the beauty of vanilla Minecraft is that you can play just as easily in creative mode as you can in survival mode, right? You have access to all the blocks. So that is just one of those random little things I can think of. So let's move our desk over here since we rearranged some of the windows. Perfect. Now this room is nice and finished. We have a beautiful little hallway here. The villagers are crowding around the keg for some reason. And I'm really liking this. I think this is nice. Actually, they have the pig manning the bar now. All the villagers have kind of left for the night. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this style of video. This is something a little bit new for me. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe. It really motivates me to continue posting stuff like this. And feel free to let me know which you prefer. Do you prefer playing modded or vanilla Minecraft? Alright, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next one.